Hello and welcome to the Masters Swimming Podcast, available on all the major podcast platforms and on YouTube. I'm Joe Malone, and joining me once again this week is our go-to strength and conditioning coach, Nathan Oxford. So how you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. It's gone quick since we last spoke,
Yeah,
hasn't it?
it's actually been quite a few months now, though. But that episode went down really well, which is exactly why I wanted to get you back on.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to, I'm very passionate about the subject, obviously. And when you invited me back, I was like, yeah, 100%, let's go for it. So, no, it was good. It was good last time to talk through things and different structures. So, no, it's exciting. It's good to talk about a subject I'm passionate about. And obviously, people that want to listen to it are passionate about it as well. So, yeah, it's good. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I know that obviously last time we spoke, you talked very openly about the fact that you are a full-time teacher and you sort of were juggling that alongside building your strength and conditioning business. So
Yes.
is all of that going well? I assume you're still a full-time teacher?
Yeah, I'm feeling it now. We're in the difficult period of exams and things. So yeah, still full-time teaching. Hopefully dropping down a day or so next academic year, but we'll see how that goes. In the same position where I'm hopefully moving up north relatively soon, pending house sale. So we're moving sort of Barnsley area, so that's exciting. So yeah, things are moving in the right direction. I've got a few more clients recently. So yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's going really well, thank you.
Oh yeah, big change. That's all sounds really positive as well. And I know you're working with a lot more swimmers now than you were again 4, 5, 6 months ago when we spoke. So kind of how many have you got in the kind of pool of people now, and have you had any sort of success with them so far?
Yeah, so I think at the start I didn't start off with thinking I'm just going to do swimming, but obviously that's my background. That's what I'm known as, sort of in that circle, and a lot of my contacts are. You know what it's like once you get drawn into a sport you love. I say you end up being that sort of person, the go-to person, and I thought that's going to be my aim. I think in the world of swimming, in masters swimming especially. So the numbers have gone up. I'm working with around 15. Obviously, numbers change on a month by month basis. But no, things are going well. It is difficult sometimes to link in with teaching as well with time and things. So I'd say I've got space for a few more, but sort of capacity is difficult, isn't it? With a full-time job. But hopefully that's something I can sort out in the future.
Yeah.
But no, things are going all right. Yeah, things are going well. Yeah, good.
It's nice actually because I've spoken to a few people. I've got to know a few people since doing the podcast that are master swimmers, and a couple of them have gone, "Oh yeah, and I enjoyed that episode you did with Nathan. I used to race him when I was younger, or I remember him from the scene
Yeah.
generally." So it's quite nice. You say you kind of you're becoming the go-to guy. It's nice because people actually remember you being a very good swimmer.
Yeah,
You still are, but obviously when you're active.
yeah. I mean, I still swim. I don't compete anymore, but it's one of those sports that you can never walk away from. I love getting in the pool. Like everybody who's going to listen to this is, born swimmer. I use it for an active recovery session. Obviously, it's non-weight bearing, really good. But yeah, some of my clients that I've raced in the past as well, so that's a little bit weird. But yeah, as you say, it's nice to see different people in and around the circuit that I haven't seen for years. Some of them that have come back into the sport, that realise how amazing the sport is, and then have come back into it at a later date. And I'm like, oh, I remember you, and we have a good catch up. So, Masters swimming's very good, isn't it, for that as well?
Yeah, it's such a friendly community. I love it. And how are things going for you in terms of because I know you compete in powerlifting as well. So how's all that going?
Yeah, so I was, I don't know whether you had it. Did you have that cold that was going around just before Christmas? Oh my
Yes,
God.
I had it. I had it over Christmas actually. Yeah,
Yeah, I know Beth had it, so
I
told the world.
think maybe it spreads through the podcast.
Yeah, I know. I think she had it for over a couple of episodes. She had it really bad, but I've had a few clients that have had it. So I was out training, I'd say 2 or 3 weeks. I've got a competition end of March, British bench press competition. So I'm training heavy for that at the minute. So things are going okay. I'm probably about 5 or 6 kilos from where I want to be.
Is
So,
that is 5, 6 kilos in how much you weigh or how much the bar weighs?
well, hopefully not. So I'm in a 105 weight category. So I'm probably weighing about 106, 107 at the minute. So in the bar, I'm hoping, well, my best is 172 and a half kilograms.
Wow.
So you get 3 lifts. So it's a very different sport to swimming. As a swimmer, I was used to doing thousands of meters, resting for 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Now I do one rep and I rest for 5 minutes. So it's a very, very different sport. But I'm excited for it. British Championships. There's another one in the summer for English Championships as well. So I think that competitive nature of myself, I've always got to have that goal. I think whatever you do in life, it's good to have those goals, isn't it? And to break things down into manageable aims and being smart what you're trying to achieve. So yeah, training's going well. I'm looking forward to it, but very different to swimming.
Yeah, no, you're totally right as well about having goals. I was chatting to a friend the other day, and he got married in September last year, and got in really good shape leading up to his wedding because he had that big motivation, that big goal to look great in a suit. And then he sort of, after the wedding, hasn't really done a lot exercise wise, and he said this year he wants to get back into it again. And I said to him, you need to set yourself an actual goal as opposed to just getting fit. It feels a bit too generic. And he's a very good runner actually, so he's talked about the idea of trying to get back under, I think it's under 19-minute 5Ks.
It's quick.
Which is very quick.
It's quick,
I think at the moment he's at around 23, which to him isn't great, but I mean, it's still an incredibly fast run. But he's kind of back on it now in that mindset of he actually has like a specific goal that I think is going to really help him. So no, I totally agree with you there. So there's a few things I want to talk about in this episode. The first one is kind of functional strength, just general functional strength for all. And then the second thing I want to talk about is actually some race day dryland warm-ups that we could sort of, if you could share some wisdom there. But starting off with that functional strength for all thing, what I'm thinking here is that, there will be a lot of master swimmers who have kids, have full-time jobs, busy lives, you get it. A lot of their time is spent, the free time they have to exercise is kind of spent in the water. So they don't necessarily get a lot of time to go in the gym. Maybe they can't afford a gym membership, etc., etc. So I want to really just touch on the very basics that people can literally just do at home, down the park, whatever, that can really aid their swimming and just make them generally stronger. So it's more that it's more that kind of non-specific strength as opposed to specific. So what I mean by that is, to me anyway, a non-specific exercise would be like a squat. That's just general functional strength, like getting out of a chair. Whereas, you see some swimmers, you see videos on Instagram, for example, of swimmers lying on a bench face down, with their arms out in front of them, sort of imitating freestyle with cables. And that is a very specific exercise.
Yeah, of course it is.
I want to kind of touch on the non-specific stuff. So what would you say are the general key principles to just functional strength?
This reminds me of lockdown training. Without everything was shut. That was it. You couldn't get into a gym. But I suppose, in terms of functional movement, you've got sort of your main fundamentals, I guess. So like a horizontal push could be like a push up. So that would be one movement. You can obviously regress these and progress them. So I think that in terms of a horizontal push, could be a bench press essentially, couldn't it? But if we're talking on a push up, a lot of people when they're doing a push up do it almost like plank position, if we call it that, which is fine. But then they will not stay in a rigid position, so the hips will drop or the hips will come up. So it's about thinking of moving as one unit. It's about working that movement in that aspect. So you've got horizontal push. So we can do a horizontal pull. So horizontal push, horizontal pull. So that could be like a bent over row, that kind of thing. So you do a reverse. The opposite of those would be vertical push, vertical pull. So that could be a pull up. I mean, not a lot of people do pull-ups. A lot of people do a lat pull down. I almost mimics a lat pull down then. But not a lot of people don't do pull-ups. It's such a good, you can do that anywhere. Obviously, be careful where you're doing it, but obviously pull-ups are essential. So you've got those sort of key sort of movements. Squat, which you've mentioned. In terms of squatting, there's loads of different variations you can do in terms of a squat. So you could do a body weight squat. A lot of people, if they don't go to depth, now you've got to go to what's comfortable for you. Obviously, if anyone gets any pain, obviously stop that movement. But you could do things like a box squat just to get where that depth is. So the squat movement's really good. You can sort of add load to it. So we've also got things like rotational movements. I know we don't want to get specific, but in terms of swimming, that one's a great one. But rotational movements, You've also got like gates, so things like lunges, so single leg work. Um, and then you've also got like a carry, I guess, as well. So like a farmer's carry,
Yeah.
which I guess essentially, if it crosses over into real life, it's you carrying your shopping home, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. So every sort of gym session should focus on those sort of key elements. So whether it's horizontal push pull, vertical push pull, rotations, and carries, plus your squat. You've also got a hinge movement, so that can link into the squat. But like a Romanian deadlift kind of thing. So they're sort of key elements that people can work on, that a training session should look good, and a well-rounded training session, I guess. So they're sort of key movements, and you can always progress all of those and regress all of those. And I guess that's where that knowledge bit comes in. And just be careful what people look at on the internet regarding certain movements. But it's a case of just like going slowly, developing certain movements, as I say, on a push-up, making sure your whole body moves as one, and things like that. So sort of they're the key movements, really.
No, that's really good. And you talked about progressions there as well, that you can obviously make things harder and harder. You know, to me, a press up is the first thing I think of with a press up is, you start off in that basic position, you make sure that you don't drop your hips, things like that. But then you can start to make it more of an incline, so you can put your feet on your sofa or something like that. So how, thinking about progressions in a few of those exercises, what kind of things would you recommend?
So if we go back to sort of a push up, a lot of people do push ups on the knees, which is fine, which is a great starting point. But instead of doing that, if you raise your hands up, so you could almost look like your stairs at home, incline it that way rather than doing it on your knees. So that's always a good sort of specific movement to start with, rather than doing it on your knees. I've seen some videos where people put, and this is a really good one, but you put them like a weighted plate on the back when you're doing a push up. I've seen a video where it's dropped off somebody's, or they've pulled it round and it's dropped on the finger and it's broken the finger. And so obviously people need to be careful of putting plates on your back. But somebody told me a really good one with it, actually, like Captain America shield. They said like how they take it off and put it back on. That's a really good way of sort of maneuvering a weight. But if you've got somebody to help you, obviously that's key. And then obviously the barbells is a good one, but they're 15k. They normally start at up to 20k. So it's a big difference from a push up to a barbell. So you can do flat dumbbell presses. And just working your way up slowly. It's not a case of looking at ego lifting and trying to be a power lifter, I guess, and going, I'm going to put 100k on the barbell straight away, and then pinning yourself down to the bar because you can't move. So that's the push-up one. Squats, obviously start off with an air squat, body weight squat is key, obviously, to start with. And then it all depends how people move, doesn't it, on how you progress certain things. But you can go to a box squat if people aren't going to depth. It just gives that external cue of where that depth is. So you can then add a goblet, like a dumbbell. So if you hold it, I can show you on the camera. So if you hold it like that position. So it can either be like a kettlebell or a dumbbell. Again, it's a big difference then, isn't it, between going from a body weight squat to a barbell, which is 15 or 20 kilograms. So there's always those variations between. Pull-ups is a great one. So obviously, if people don't do pull-ups, if you can't do a pull-up, you can always add like a band underneath. So like an assisted one. So they're good. So you've got loads of different variations for different movements. I think people don't think outside the box sometimes. But it is that knowledge, isn't it, of knowing what to do and when to do it, I guess.
Yeah, in lockdown, I actually got quite into just getting creative with a lot of my exercises, because it was getting quite boring doing the same things over and over again and having no variation. And I sort of got into doing things like the horse stance, for example, where you put your legs really, really wide, and then you get down into a squat, hold your hands in front of you and just hold it for as long as you can.
Like isometric,
yeah. And I remember the first time I tried it was like 30 seconds or something, but actually I was doing it maybe 3 times a week. Just once, and in the end I could hold it for sort of 4.5, 5 minutes. And for the first 3 minutes it was just not painful at all, and then you also learn to sit through the pain as well.
Mental challenge as well.
Yeah,
that's what
it was, isn't it? It was as much a mental challenge as it was physical, but sort of really felt my endurance increase, because again in lockdown the 2 main things that I was doing was kind of body weight work at home. I think running, that was my aerobic training, and I actually found it really helped my running, doing things like those isometric moves. So do you ever plan any of those into your plans?
So isometric movement, if somebody's not got any weight at home, isometric movements are great for increasing strength. So there's loads of research to show that isometric increases strength. However, it would only increase, or the majority of the strength increase would come from that position that you're holding. Okay. Where you obviously want to be stronger throughout the whole motion. So like a wall sit would be a great example. They sting. Wall sits are horrible. But in terms of the lockdown that you said, I was the same. So I ended up buying bags of sand
nice.
From B&Q, I think, and then I ended up taping them up with gaffer tape, and I ended up using those. And I had a 25, a 50, and a 75k. And I was doing like over the shoulder ones, and even simple carries as part of those fundamental movements that I mentioned earlier. But you've just got to be creative, haven't you? But isometric stuff's great, especially if you haven't got access to a lot of kit. But some kit is so. Aldi do a brilliant set of they do suspension trainers, like a cheaper version of TRXs.
Yeah.
And they have loads of stuff. They've almost got the Bosu balls. Have you seen those? So they've got mini versions of those for your feet. So it almost becomes like a really unstable surface. So they've got loads of different stuff, and it's relatively cheap. So you haven't got to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on a squat rack, bench, because that's expensive. You can buy cheap and cheerful, or you can make it yourself just to create that extra resistance. Because I suppose at the end of the day, as you just said, that you can do something to start and it's hard, and you adapt to it, and then where do you go? So you've got to always have an added stressor for you to adapt to, and it could be more reps, it could be more could be in terms of time. Ideally resistant. So home training is great. People then might be limited due to what kit they've got. But I think from lockdown, people did buy a lot more kit, didn't they? I think. Yeah. So what was your go-to exercise over lockdown? What else did you do?
Well, the first lockdown, it was all total body weight. Although I think because the first lockdown, if I remember rightly, was maybe 3 or 4 months or something. So I eventually got a weight vest, but I had to wait a while for that because they were selling so fast. So towards the end of lockdown, I did get a weight vest that goes up to 20 kilograms, but they're in sort of mini 1.5
blocks, aren't they?
Blocks, so you can kind of take them out. So I was doing a lot of like lunges with that on. We at the first lockdown, we lived in a flat, and we had a hotel next door to us with a big car park. And because the hotel was shut, the car park was empty. So I'd just be sort of lunging around this car park over and over again. I also did press ups with the weight vest on, but I actually found that it really started to mess with my shoulder joints. And I think because of where the weight vest sits, all of the weight at the top of your body. So I just think my posture was bad when I was pressing. So I stopped that in the end. I didn't have a pull-up bar back then, but I invested in one again, which by the time we had the second lockdown, I was kind of clipping that to the door and doing pull-ups. And actually, that's the first time I've got into pull-ups ever. And I've since never stopped. I just love them.
Great.
I do them in the gym now. And again, through all the lockdowns after that, I was always kind of using the pull-up bar. So they were my go-tos, really. And then I was going out running. But the moment the pool was back open, I was straight back in.
Yeah. That's where the games are made, isn't it? In the pool. So no, you've got to. But yeah, it does bring back memories. But there's lots of kit available, and the prices went crazy, didn't they? But everything has come down, and there's a lot on eBay at the minute. So in terms of like push and pull movements, especially on an unstable surface, the TRX, I know that's a branded one, but that kind of suspended trainer is brilliant. It doesn't take up a lot of room. You can put it away. Pull-up bars are great. So for somebody that works at home, or hasn't got the time to get out to the gym, or isn't able to get a gym membership, training at home is a good substitute. Could be limited by kit, but there's so much out there.
Yeah. How much importance do you place on general activity throughout the day that isn't maybe gym specific in terms of strength? Because what I always remember as a kid was my granddad was a bricklayer, and when he was retired by the time I came around. But I always remember he had really thick, strong forearms. And every time he shook my hand when I was really young, I always used to think, oh, he's got really good grip, this guy, And I always used to think, why is he so much stronger? And he's older than, say, my dad or my uncle, but it's because he had a very active job lifting things every day. And I also heard a great story once, which was they actually did a test on this farmer who, when a lamb was born, they got him to pick this lamb up and like walk from one end of the farm to the other. And then he had to do that every day until the lamb was like a full-size sheep. And they actually then tested his bicep muscles, his forearms, his legs. And all of his muscle mass had increased just because of the progressive overload
over time
every day. So kind of, do you place any importance on general activity throughout the day with your clients?
Yeah, I think so always look at what people do. So you've got to take into account that because of recovery as well. If somebody's doing a really heavy manual job, you've got to take that into account. If somebody's I suppose on the flip side, if somebody's not moving all day, that can cause issues as well. So I think there's obviously a balance, but you've got to take that into account regarding if somebody's lifting something heavy all day, like you've just said, that's going to impact on their recovery, mental state. Are they drinking enough? Are they eating enough? So you've got to take all that into account. And also, is it a specific? So, like if they're doing a lot of carries, you wouldn't want to put that in extra into their training session. Carry this extra sheep, a few more meters. But I think you've got to take everything into account. I mean, you're not just when do you swim? It's got to be like what's your day job, and you've got to have an understanding of what that person's like. So I have a lot of clients that train in the mornings, early mornings. So I'll get videos of people doing specific lifts early, so to be like 7:00, 7:30. And they've already a typical swimmer, isn't it? That's what it is. They would be up, they've warmed up, they've been in the gym, they've recorded, they've sent them, and it's 7:30. So also you've got to take that into account as well. So yeah, I think the day-to-day is obviously very important, not just when do you swim, so we don't make you tired. So yeah, 100%.
So something else that's just sprung to mind for me is that my kind of plan now, my program is 3 swims a week and 3 gyms a week. And I probably a few years ago, I used to see those two things as very separate things. The gym was like about getting stronger and looking good, and the swim was about swimming. But I now consider my gym work to be for swimming. So even though I only do 3 swim sessions a week, I actually, when I think about my training, I do 6 sessions a week, and it's all geared towards racing faster. And I think that kind of mindset shift of like, when I'm in the gym, I'm always thinking about getting stronger for my sport is quite important. So again, I don't know if you ever kind of recommend this, but sometimes it's like, don't be afraid to drop a swim and replace it with the gym, because actually that might be quite more beneficial.
Yeah, it all depends on your event, doesn't it? If you're a long distance swimmer, you need to be in the pool more. If you're a sprinter, I mean, I remember Mark Foster, he hardly ever swam, didn't he? He was always in the gym. So it always depends on your event. As we spoke last time, you always start off with a need analysis of the sport and what the event is, and then where the athlete's at, and then go from there. Especially like, to mix things up is very good. Everyone's different. Everyone responds to training in different ways. But like as you said, it's all about making sure that whatever you do in the gym is going to help your sport. There is a thing, as you get older as well, you do lose muscle mass. So just for life in general, it's good to go to the gym. It's good to do resistance work. So there's all that interplay as well. So so things like, I'm just trying to think so in terms of your training, what would that look like in a typical week for gym work, let's say? Would you do an upper day? Would you do a lower day? What would
I have like a session A and a session B. So and it's basically 5x5 training, and it's all the kind of the big compound lift. So session A is like squats, bench press, and row, and session B is deadlift, pull-ups, shoulder press.
Okay. Yeah, good. So in like range of motion is important as well for a swimmer. But have a look at your I don't know what days you swim, but you want to make sure your heavy strength work is after mainly most of your swims in the week. As we spoke last time, you don't want to get really tight. You want your power work at the beginning of the week, or your beginning of your training week, I guess. And then sort of your strength work towards the end, and range of motion's key as well. So obviously make sure you do those as well. That's me telling you.
No, that makes sense. The final thing I wanted to touch on for the general functional strength topic really is the term greasing the groove. I don't know if you've heard of that phrase before, but basically what it means is, and again, I'm interested on your thoughts on this. It's if you don't necessarily have time to go to the gym for an hour or 45 minutes or whatever it may be, it's like doing things throughout the day. So like, you know, on a very basic level, you could be working from home 9 to 5, and every hour you get down and you do a set of press ups. So it's very high volume training.
Yeah.
But it's all those exercises that, you know, you would advocate for, but rather than it being in one intense period, it's done throughout the day. And that way people don't need to necessarily dedicate time. Is that something that you like?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you can't dedicate a specific amount of time, then you've got to go. I mean, there's no harm in it, is there? If we're talking about general fitness, for anybody, then I think that's got to be a good thing. It could even be things like having a band over the door and doing some tricep push downs every now and again. Or so, you know, it's not a bad thing. I think, especially as people work from home more, you can just be stuck on your computer, on your laptop, and then going from this into the living room watching telly. And I think, you know, having those little challenges maybe in the day, I don't think it's a bad thing. As you say, it's obviously going to increase the volume, and does that impact on the sport? But if we're talking about general fitness, and general, I guess, fundamental movement and capacity, then why not? Especially if you can't dedicate a certain amount, because when you add that up throughout the day, you've got that. The goal was whatever you've set for that day have been hit, then, haven't they? So yeah, I think that's a good thing. Yeah, I agree. Is that something you do?
No, it's not. It's just something I've read about plenty of times. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think if it gets more people moving, I think it can't be a bad thing, can it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So moving now on to kind of the race day dryland warm-ups. Again, this is something that I've been speaking to quite a few people about what's their kind of warm-up routine on race day. And again, it can be event specific.
Yeah.
But something that I have always done is warm up in the water. But I've spoken to a few people who are predominantly sprinters, and they don't like going in the water. They like going off the block and hitting the water in their race. That's the first time they touch the water that day. But what they do dryland wise is a really, really solid routine of moving, of a few explosive moves as well, like some press ups, things like that. So that just really got me thinking about my own warm up routine. Because to be honest, I go in quite mindlessly. I just swim up a bit. So again, that all comes down to personal choice, whatever you prefer, going in or staying on dry land or doing a bit of both. But if we're just talking dry land, are there certain moves moves generally that you would recommend for people?
So it's funny that you say you look back on your warm up, because like looking back on mine, we used to get into the pool with probably 1,000 other swimmers in lane 4 or whatever it was going to be, and then that'll be it for an hour, and then you might do some static stretching, and then I might swing my arms around for a little bit, and then that'll be it. That was, you know, me reflecting on my previous warm up. And it's only when you start looking into what is an effective warm up and how should a warm up look in terms of dry land work that you start to appreciate, I guess, sort of key movements or beneficial movements. So I follow, and all my clients follow, like a RAMP protocol. So RAMP stands for raise, activate and mobilize, and then prime. So the first initial bit would be like raising the heart rate. Now that doesn't have to be sprint on the spot. And these are things you should do on sort of a day-to-day basis. What you don't want to do is somebody that's listening to this go, right, my next competition, I'm going to follow this RAMP protocol, and it'll be totally new to me, and I've never done it before. So it needs to almost be like a routine, and to put it in your training anyway, whether that's pre-pool or pre-gym. So looking at raising heart rates, that could be like, I don't know, high knees, skipping. It didn't have to be with a skipping rope, could just be that particular motion. And then sort of activate and mobilize. So that's when you get like your thread your needle, your thoracic rotations in, that kind of movement. So rather than static stretching, which should be done after you to help with range of motion, you want sort of dynamic activation. So here's where you'd look at things like that joint activation, mobilization, that kind of thing. And then after that, you would prime. So priming could be air squats, it could be squat jumps, could be, I've seen people with medicine balls rotating against the wall really quickly. So those explosive movements. So a lot of research shows that if you perform exercise such as squat jumps or those rotation or squats before a specific movement, your body is ready then to almost outperform itself for the next part, rather than if you didn't do that. So yeah, 100% you need to follow a ramp protocol, raise, activate, mobilize, and prime. So that would be my but from that, I don't want people just going, right, I'm going to go and do that before my competition. It's something people have to put in over time. And it's amazing, isn't it, when you watch, I was helping out a swimming club that I won't say which one, but they turn up on poolside, they'd all be there chatting. The mind's not switched on, the bodies aren't ready, and then they'll just dive in cold, and the pool will be freezing, and that's how you can easily get injured. And they'll be sprinting for the first 15 meters. So yeah, it can cause issues, can't it? So it's all about making sure you warm up, not just for the body, but get the mind ready as well.
Yeah, and again, would you say that? I mean, your principle generally sounds like it would suit anybody, regardless of the pace or the distance. But those kind of explosive moves, and more specifically thinking dry land, would you say that's more geared to sprinters? Whereas if you're going to go and race an 800, it's probably best you get in there and do a few lengths.
Yeah, I think again, it is personal preference, but I think it's good to get in the pool anyway. But pre-pool, follow ramp protocol. I think that whatever your event is, you're going to start on the block, aren't you? So you need that explosive movement anyway. So I think that, to end the prime session on squat jumps or squats and then squat jumps is a really good movement to do. But if your first movement is off a block, then you've got to be ready for that first movement. And if it's short course within 20, 30 seconds, you're going to be at the first turn. So you've got to be ready for that as well. So I think it doesn't really matter, in my opinion, what event you're doing. You've always got to have a land warm up. But again, personal preference. I know people that just don't get in the same as you, that just don't get in the pool, and they'll do just land work. So all comes down to personal preference, but I would suggest follow ramp protocol, increase the heart rate, activate and mobilize, and then prime. And then if you need to get into the pool, do that.
So just to clarify, then you're saying the ramp protocol first, which would be dry land, then in the water to work on some technical things, get a feel for the water, or would you say that getting in the water first could count as your first part of that, raising the heart rate?
So if I was racing and I had my warm up at whatever time it would be, I'd do the ramp first, and then I'd get in the pool, because you're then going to have a short break anyway. So you're not going to go straight into your event. So before you race, you follow the land ramp anyway. So you'll end up doing it twice: one pre-pool before you warm up in the pool, and then later on again before you race.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Like I say, I've only ever done mindless warm-ups, if I'm honest, in the water.
Yeah, it's
London. And actually, your description of what you used to do, where you kind of then do static stretches and swing your arms, you've just literally described my warm-up.
It's true though, isn't it? I used to do it all the time, and I used to, I'd be swinging my arms. I'd probably same direction, then maybe opposite directions. Do a couple of half bothered jumps, and then that'll be it. But you've got to do it with intent, haven't you? And in terms of whether you should pre-pool or pool, I think a lot of that comes down to personal preference. And if you feel you're mentally prepared to then race, then great. If you feel you're not ready, then it's going to affect your race, isn't it? So. It's all down to personal preference and trialing different things. Just because we're master swimmers doesn't mean everything's set in stone, and we should never try new things.
No, absolutely. Well, I'm certainly going to be trying the ramp protocol.
Sounds really formal, doesn't it? But there's loads of information on it. I'll email you over some. I'll email you what I give to some of my clients for the ramp stuff.
Oh, sounds great. Thank you. So just finally then, you talked about the idea you've got sort of 12 clients at Swimmers now. I mean, obviously you've probably got clients in other sports as well, but how do you generally work with a client? So if a client comes to you and says, Nathan, I want to work with you, what's the kind
Yeah.
of starting point that you run with them?
So I do a consultation to start with, and I've had a few consultations where they just want to talk about S&C and their sport, and then that's it after that. And they just want to get an idea about what they're doing is correct. So if anyone's listening, they just want to go through what they're doing. I'm more than happy to speak to them about it. If they then want a one-to-one, and it's not for everybody. If everyone sorry, it's not for everybody. But if people want a one-to-one sort of coach, I guess. Um, I gather like as much information about them, what they do, how their training schedule. Obviously, they have to fill in a PARQ form, which is have you got any injuries? All the conditions that you can think of. So for insurance purposes, so that people fill one of those out. Once that's done, I'll then do a movement analysis. So that'll be things like what does a squat look like? What does a lunge look like? Are there any shifts? I'll get people to video it from different angles, so they'll get that feedback. They then get access to an app, and then we go from there. So week one's about a movement analysis, and then start initiating a little bit of load. And then we just plug it into their schedule. So it might be that they can only, as you said, some people have got no time, they do it from home, as and when they can. I've got some people that do twice a day just because that's how they can fit it in. I've got other people that are in the gym 4 or 5 times. Not all swimmers, but some people train a lot more on land. So we do it on a weekly basis. And then I give them feedback through the app or on WhatsApp about how things are going, and then we taper off for a comp. So, but everyone's going all right. People are pulling some big numbers at the minute, and we've got some people doing what we got 8 to 10 pull-ups with 5 to 10 kilogram attached to them, which is very good.
Very good, yeah.
Some very good deadlifting, bench pressing. Not Ben Proud yet, but we talked about this earlier, weren't we? Some Ben Proud bench pressing. But yeah, I've got some bench pressers that are doing 130k for one, so quick as well. Yeah, so it's going really well.
Smashing. And how can people find you?
So if you go to website oxalt.com, and then there's a link there for a free consultation. So if you just fill your details in, I'll get in touch, and then we can discuss everything in S&C for Masters Swimmers.
Smashing. Well, I really enjoyed that. Again, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it.
No problem, Joe. Yeah, thank you. Thanks again, mate.
All right. No worries. And I'm sure we'll speak to you again soon.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.